Phi to the power of negative 2, 0.318966. That's the power of the golden ratio. And if you actually take the entire solar system, phi to the power of negative 2. Phi to the power of negative 3, by the way, is tattooed right here on my wrist because it's a discovery of mine in Plato's Republic, 509d to 511, on a divided line. Of course, it doesn't belong to Plato. It's actually an ancient Pythagorean discovery, and who knows before them. But anyway, phi to the power of negative 2, 0.318966. If you actually take the entire universe with the sun at the null point, the axis on a Cartesian coordinates, the Earth actually sits right at the golden section harmonic of phi to the power of negative 2. The plane of inertia. Actually, people love talking about the plane of inertia, but they actually ever get into the important stuff, and I could actually wax poetic on this topic for hours. But the plane of inertia, of course, everybody's seen, well, I don't know if you have seen, but if you actually take magnetic viewing film and you put against the cross-section of a magnet, you'll actually see it as a bright white line. It actually appears as a null point underneath the supercell. And of course, at the center of any magnet, there is no magnetic flux. At the center of gravity, there is, of course, no gravity. Gravity, of course, is not a field modality. It's literally an anti-field, specifically, as I've said. And this is, of course, really important. Like at the center of an electrostatic charge, there is the highest concentration the same. But at the center of magnetism, there is a magnetic object. There is no magnetism present other than the inherent incoherent magnetism inherent to each and every atom and every molecule. In the center of gravity, there is no gravity, of course. There is zero gravity at the center of gravity. This would actually tell you a lot as to the nature of fields, but getting back to the plane of inertia, at the plane of inertia, at the center of two magnets, you actually can bring two magnets together and stick a magnetic probe in there with a Gauss meter and find out as you actually bring the magnets together that the magnetic flux will actually decrease to zero. Very important, that plane of inertia. And of course, I'm surprised that nobody learned in school or high school or college about the right-hand rule. The right-hand rule, of course, this is the charge, that's the current. The right-hand rule actually applies a lot of stuff, but in actual description and defining in very simplex terms, what is the right-hand rule? It's the maximum pressure mediation against which you could actually go and yet still be a part of the system. Like 90 degrees to the magnetic flux of a toroidal field, which of course magnetism is toroidal. The only two conjugate geometries of the universe, a la field theory, is dielectricity and magnetism. Magnetism is the dielectric field, the loss of that energy or inertia, which is defined as discovered by the ancient Pythagoreans, which is why it's so important, which is why it's my discovery in Plato's Republic 509d, which is why it's tattooed right here in my hand. This right-hand rule of the maximum throw at which one can exist perpendicular to the centrifugal divergent flow of magnetism is the only place where life can exist. This is the golden section wherein which creation happens, and it's the golden section, the Fibonacci. And this is also, too, and I just got done making a video about time being polarized. And by the way, on any magnet, the time and the rarefaction and compression exists at a ratio of 1 to phi. 1 on the north pole of a magnet and phi, i.e. 1.618, on the south pole of the magnet. But that plane of inertia is 90 degrees, or the maximum throw, perpendicular to that divergent magnetic field. Also perpendicular to the centripetal convergent dielectric field of increasing inertia and acceleration. These are the only two geometries of the universe. The only two field theories. Field modalities, excuse me. Dielectricity and magnetism. Respectively, they are the toroid and the hyperboloid. Hyperboloid, of course, is an hourglass shape. The negative image, geometrically, by the way, of a hyperboloid, an hourglass shape, is a torus, i.e. a donut shape. The negative image of a torus is the hyperboloid. These two, of course, conjugately form the sphere. Now, the plane of inertia is the maximum throw against both the dielectric and the magnetic. You ever seen like a spiral arm galaxy? All the mass and matter, i.e. creation, exists at the plane of inertia. If we were actually able to see the magnetic field of any and all spiral arm galaxies, of course the toroidal geometry actually forms around it. The maximum field, the actual maximum inverse field that is against both the magnetic and the dielectric, i.e. a null point, Kind of like some people used to build their houses in certain places because they're in harsh elements, and it's at a null point between the winds and the sweeping sea weather. So you're actually at this null point. I'm actually trying to make a simplex analogy of the null point, meaning the plane of inertia where actually life can exist. It's 90 degrees to both of the fields. It's really, and it's not complex physics or math. Everybody should read up on the right-hand rule. You'll actually get the definition of the right-hand rule, but the explanation, of course, is simply understanding the nature at which propagation occurs, like an AC generator. We actually have the magnetic and the current and the dielectric. These occur 90 degrees towards one another. We actually set up an ether torsion or an ether perturbation. That's how an AC generator works. I mean, I don't know what people think is going on, like you're squeezing out electrons out of an AC generator like a tube of toothpaste, but what you're actually doing is you're creating field disturbances, and the manifestation of this nonsense, which is an ether perturbation modality we call electrons. There's no such thing as a charge-carrying particle. By the way, Nikola Tesla, James Clerk Maxwell, Oliver Heaviside, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, they all said the notion of a charge-carrying particle, i.e. the electron, is BS. It is absolutely BS. It's purely conceptual. It has no basis in reality. There's no friggin' particle traveling down the power lines, outside or in front or behind your house. I said the galactic plane of inertia. This is also, too, the reason why the aurora. And scientists, I actually was stupefied at this. There was a huge, it was 2007 or something. Anyway, it was a huge coronal mass ejection, and that, of course, really kicks up the aurora borealis. And sometimes you could see it as far south as here, Kentucky. Rarely. And I could. I remember it was 2006 or something like that. Huge coronal mass ejection. The northern lights were really ablaze. But what confused the hell out of the scientists, and they're scientists or idiots, is like, we know the aurora borealis came really far south on the hemispheres, both like in Australia and the northern, North America and Russia, came really far south. The only places in Florida and whatnot they couldn't see it. But where you did see it really strongly also was islands and countries right along the equator. That's the second pole, if you will. I mean, that's where life exists. I mean, that's also, too, where most life is. The closer you get to the plane of inertia, the further away you're getting away from geomagnetic precession. You're reaching the null point between the magnetic and the dielectric, which is the right-hand rule. Read what the right-hand rule is, by the way. Everybody should know what the right-hand rule is. That's where most of the Earth's life is at. Colombia, Ecuador, Africa, on and on. I mean, Indonesia, Vietnam, that's where all the life is. That's where all the deadly bugs and insects are, too, that give you malaria. But, I mean, the closer you get to the plane of inertia on the Earth, the more life you actually encounter. Same is true when you look at the galactic plane of inertia. The galactic plane of inertia of the spiral arms of any galaxy is, inverse to the maximum throw, if you will, actually, against the magnetic and the dielectric, i.e. the two conjugate geometries of the universe. I just wanted to say, the plane of inertia, 90 degrees, both the divergent magnetic and convergent dielectric, is the golden zone. I actually think some scientist ages ago called it the golden zone. Well, the Earth also, too, sits at that golden zone. It sits actually at a place of 5 to the power of -2, or 0.318966. If you actually take a look top down at the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, on. Earth sits at 5 to the power of -2. It sits at a golden zone, not too, the Goldilocks thing. Not too hot, not too cold. It's where life exists. Life must and only does exist the closer you get, or right at the plane of inertia. Because it is against the winds of the magnetic and the winds of the dielectric that actually form the two competing geometries of the yin and the yang of the entire universe. I find that so fascinating. You actually look at, and this, of course, would tell us where to look for life, too. I'm not saying life doesn't exist in harsh conditions. We actually have to look for, looking at our life, we exist at a golden zone between ourselves and the sun, and we're at a golden zone at the galactic plane, which, of course, all matter in the spiral arm galaxy, of course, sits at the plane of inertia. I mean, every spiral arm galaxy has this huge toroidal magnetic field. In the center of these galaxies, MG961, I believe, it's emitting out trillions of tons of hydrogen from a supermassive black hole at the center of a galaxy along the geomagnetic precession. This is also, too, why people want to move south when they get older. They want to retire where it's nice and warm all year long. You know, we're not undergoing, because the Earth sits at a tilt, and of course we're actually subject to the flux and reflux of seasons on the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. The further the closer we get towards the poles of our Earth, you know, the more we undergo these hot and cold fluctuations. How they go back, you know, spring, summer, fall, and winter, right? A lot of us get sick of that stuff. Of course, it's nice to have a variety, but this is why everybody, and this is why I have a house in South Florida too, by the way. It never gets hot. It never gets cold down there, like maybe 2 cold days out of the year. I mean, not living in the tropics, but actually Fort Myers is a tropical zone. The plane of inertia, I would love to wax poetic on the countless ways that the plane of inertia is applicable. Because that's really the only place, that's the place where life is born, it's a place where life thrives. And it's the maximum throw against the geometries, the 2 geometries, and there are only 2 geometries in the universe, which are the magnetic and the dielectric. We actually take the centripetal convergent hyperboloidal geometry of the dielectric, and we actually take the convergent, which should actually be right about here, which is 45 degrees. The maximum, and that's also true in a magnet, 45 degrees relative to dielectric, but the entire the maximum toroidal geometry against the dielectric, of course, is 90 degrees to the dielectric, but the maximum magnetic throw is 45 degrees relative to the convergent dielectric, which is, you know, right about this, 45 degrees. Life only occurs right here. All life thrives and exists 90 degrees here, which is 90 degrees to the dielectric. There's also still the maximum throw against both, which is the dielectric here, the magnetic at 45, which is, of course, this is what you can actually measure this with the Gauss meter too. You actually hit the Gauss meter towards the edge of a magnet. The maximum magnetic divergence occurs right at the edge of the magnet. It's extremely viewable and palpable with any magnetic viewing device or a Gauss meter. So we actually sit 90 degrees relative to the dielectric here, plane of inertia right here, and of course the magnetic maximum divergence is 45 degrees relative to the dielectric, and also to 45 degrees relative to the plane of inertia. This is the Goldilocks zone. All this stuff is amazing. There's not a single documentary or YouTube channel or anything else that's ever talked about this fact. It's that perfect golden zone where life necessitatively must spring and only really can thrive. Anyway, I'd love to talk about that topic much, much more. I don't know how interested people would be in discussing it, but it's actually incredibly important. Not incredibly important for daily life, but incredibly important for the entirety of understanding things better. It's important. Because a lot of people are superficial, like, well, how's that going to get me richer? You know? I ain't going to put food on my table knowing that. That's like, you're right, it's not. It's not. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.